Well, hello, everybody. Pastor Joel here with you one more time for the past days with Pastor Joel. There's probably no one tuning in right now because no one knew I was going to do this video right now, including me. But as promised in my last video, I have a new setup. In fact, you can probably see it, and still some bugs to work out. But I thought, why not just take the plunge and go ahead and try this? So I believe you can go ahead and make comments and things if you want to do that, if there's anybody here, and I may check that as we go on. Again, this is a brand new setup for me, and it has been a few days of trying to find the right cables, and I have a really limited space to work in, and I actually, true story, I have a couple bookshelves, both taller than me, both filled with basically theology books, and they're heavy. And I thought, I could probably move these without taking all the books off the shelf and save some time. I've done that before. And so I only had to move them both just a few inches. So I'm on the second one, and I'm literally down like on my hands and knees trying to throw my shoulder into this thing. I mean, just really dumb. And all of a sudden, I don't know what's going on. And this whole bookcase fell on me and all these books. And I've never really gotten, well, a long time ago I have, but I haven't gotten like hit by a car from behind for a very long time. But it's almost like what I have now, like whiplash. And over the last couple of days, my head and neck have actually been pretty sore, but totally my fault. But I thought, you know what? Hey, I'm 53 years old and I've moved lots of bookcases without taking off the books. And this is the first time this has actually happened. So maybe it's a blessing, but at any rate, what I wanted to do is a way of testing this, testing the sound and so on. Again, there might be some bugs, so I just ask for your patience in that. But I have big plans for this channel. And part of that was being able to sometimes review videos, certainly to share scripture and be able to sometimes highlight different things. And in order to do that, I had to have a way to share my screen. And then it's like you get into that and it's like, well, maybe I should do this too. And you can see up here in the corner, powered by StreamYard. That's what I'm using. And as long as I'm using the free version, that little logo will be up there. I hope that doesn't bother you. Eventually I may go to a paid version, but I like free. And you can actually do some pretty cool things with it. And I had some friends that do videos and that's what they're using. So at any rate, what we're going to do is we're going to look at just a few minutes of a video by Greg Laurie. A lot of you probably know Greg Laurie, pretty well-known pastor. This video, in fact, has over 1 million views. 1 million. I mean, that's a lot of people that have tuned in. I think his channel has something like 515,000 subscribers. I appreciate a lot of what he's done. Definitely has a heart for evangelism and has been involved in lots of crusades. I don't question his sincerity. If any of you saw the movie The Jesus Revolution, which came out, probably been a little over a year ago or so now, maybe even a little longer than that. I enjoyed it, even if you don't agree with a lot of theology, which a lot of you watching may not. I thought it was worth seeing. Some really good things to think about and just some interesting history. But it was basically about the Calvary Chapel movement, and Chuck Smith is kind of the founder of that movement, and Greg Laurie is a very well-known pastor of that movement. Another pastor would be Jack Hibbs, that some of you may know. But Greg Laurie was a prominent character in that. Well, he didn't play himself, but the man who played him, just kind of portrayed his beginnings in this movement in the Jesus Revolution. But at any rate, Calvary Chapel was largely started on end times predictions. And while Chuck Smith, Calvary Chapel's founder, I do not believe actually set a date. He pretty much said that he thought that either rapture and or second coming of Christ was going to happen sometime in the 80s, around there, and that's because of Israel becoming a nation in 1948, and Jesus saying in this generation. And from that perspective, once Israel became a nation again, people thought, well, that's what Jesus was talking about. So it was going to be about 40 years later when the world ended. And of course, that didn't happen. And so we're going to listen to a little bit of his video. I hope you'll be able to hear the sound in it a little bit. And again, if this is a little glitchy, just forgive me. And I could have just recorded a video first and then gone to live later, but I really don't edit videos anyway. And so we're going to give it a shot. So I'm going to be a little clumsy, probably getting around on here a little bit, but we're going to get to Pastor Laurie's video here. And I skipped a little bit of the intro where he tells a joke. Seems like he likes to tell jokes and be kind of funny for a few minutes. And I guess that's one way to, that's one way to do it. One way to preach. but then he gets to the text, and I want you to listen, especially to he sort of describes it like John had some challenges. John, who wrote Revelation. So let's go ahead and see what he has to say.
In fact, Jesus even said he was going to live his life out. So he was an old man. They banished him to the island of Patmos, never expecting to hear from him again. But while he was on that island, Jesus gave to John what we call the revelation. Jesus gave John a guided tour of the future, among other things. And John speaks of the future for him, which really is, in many ways, not completely, but a good part of this book, the present for us.
Now, let me just pause there for a minute. Think of all the assumptions there. John is speaking of the future for him, and then he did make a clarifier. Not everything, but pretty much all of it is, the present for us. Now, does the Scripture say anything about that? Of course not. He also talks about these challenges, which he'll kind of continue with a little bit. That it's almost like and I don't want to exaggerate here too much, but it's almost like poor John. That must have been so difficult for him to try to use language in a way that would make sense to us, where really we're the ones with the challenge. I'll get back to that more a little later because it's really important. But let's go on a little bit with Pastor Laurie.
I mean, here's a man with first century language trying to describe 21st century phenomena.
Full stop. Here's a man with first century language trying to describe 21st century phenomena. I think I directly quoted what he said. Total assumption, total futurist assumption, especially total dispensationalist assumption, total Calvary Chapel assumption. Now, I'm not trying to just bang on Calvary Chapel here, but that just happens to be his background. But again, that whole movement was really started on the end times. And I remember the first time I watched this, I was in. I'll get back to the video in a minute, but I was in my office when I was pastoring a church in Rupert, Idaho. I'm no longer a pastor there. A lot of you know that, but some of you may not. But I almost fell out of my chair. I mean, because that is so completely upside down. No, I'm sorry, Pastor Laurie. John didn't have a problem using first century language trying to describe 21st century events. You have a problem, which I had for almost 3 decades, assuming that John was trying to describe 21st century events. John was just fine. John knew really, really well how to use language. And there's so much here where we've got to understand, which it is, even though I said earlier, and I mean this, I think Pastor Laurie is probably sincere in his beliefs. I think most pastors are. I think there are some who have been exposed to the fulfilled position and are just stubborn or prideful or afraid of losing their vocation, which I understand. But I think a lot of pastors are sincere, and he may be. At the same time, it's a little hard to understand how could somebody be a pastor that long and not learn a little bit about how the Hebrews thought and taught in word pictures, because John, and sometimes people say it this way, that Revelation is the most Old Testament, New Testament book, meaning that John is constantly drawing from the Old Testament and pulling all these scriptures together and pulling all these pictures together and these symbols and using the same type of language that the Old Testament Hebrew prophets used. And how Pastor Laurie wouldn't know that or be aware of that after all these years of preaching is, what to say? It's a little disconcerting. It's an understatement. Let's go on.
And beyond. He's talking about these wars that are going to break out and the massive destruction. And how could he have envisioned what could be a nuclear exchange in AD 90? There was no precedent for such a concept. In fact, black powder wasn't invented until the 9th century after Christ, and dynamite invented in the 19th century.
Now, he said something really important there. He said 90 AD, and the late date for Revelation, it's actually usually 95 or 96. But at any rate, that's why the dating of the writing in Revelation is so important, because it's an assumption. And obviously, if John was writing, according to Pastor Laurie, some 20 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, he's obviously not predicting that event.
John writes prophetically about one man that will take control of the world, and no one will be able to buy or sell unless they take the mark of this man, the Antichrist. That would sound so implausible and futuristic even 50 years ago. But today with computer technology, this system could be up and running in no time.
So if I were to have an opportunity to sit down and have a cup of coffee with Greg Laurie, which sounds fun to me, I'm always up for a cup of coffee, especially if he was buying and it included breakfast, I might say, Pastor Laurie, I listened to you talking about the book of Revelation, your overview, and you mentioned that John was speaking of this one man, this Antichrist who's going to take over the world and so on. Could you show me the verse in Revelation where it talks about this Antichrist? And you know what he would find? Nothing. Goose egg. Zilch. Nada. Antichrist is never, ever mentioned, even one time in Revelation. And yet, over the years, I would say a majority of the sermons I have heard, speaking of the Antichrist, are preached from Revelation. Now, how whack-nut is that? Now, I know some people will say, well, the beast and the Antichrist were one. I mean, you can conjecture that and you can make that assumption, but the fact is that this same author, this is so important. This same author, there's, as far as I know, essentially universal agreement in the scholarship on this, that the same John who penned Revelation also penned 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, John wrote, "It is the last hour." And then he mentions Antichrist and Antichrists, plural, had already come at that time. And in fact, he said that was evidence that it was the last hour then. And so, again, this is really, again, I don't doubt the sincerity of Greg Laurie's heart, but it's just really inexcusable how ignorant he is of these things. Let's go on.
We read in the book of Revelation about an army marching 200 million strong. When John wrote these words, there were not even 200 million people on the face of the earth. But today the population of the planet is around 7 billion. And indeed, there's a nation on earth that could field an army of 200 million. Revelation, the book that dares to predict the future, not once, not twice, but many times. And it's just one of the prophetic books of the Bible.
All right. I think that's all we'll do on this. We may come back to this video again another time. But I just, I got to mention a couple things here. And let me just, again, because I'm trying and exploring here, let me pull up, I'm just going to pull up a Bible here so that we can see this. Now, Greg Laurie is saying, all throughout that John's predicting these things that are largely happening in our time. And I know a lot of you will already know this. Get out of here. But let's look at this together. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. He sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things he saw. Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of this prophecy, and keep the things which are written in it, for the time is near. So in the very first 3 verses of Revelation, it says shortly. Some versions may say quickly here in verse 1. And I can't tell you how many times I have been told, well, you see, that actually means that when it happens, it's going to be super quick. But when you look up every other time that same Greek word is used, it never means that. And then here it says, the time is near. So am I going to believe John, who believed this was going to take place shortly and the time was near, or Greg Laurie? Now, another important thing here is so important. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him. So we've got Jesus, we've got God the Father, we've got an angel, we've got John, and they're all on the same page in terms of when these things were going to happen. Should I believe them, or should I believe Greg Laurie? Now let's jump all the way to the end of Revelation, and you're going to see here, I think it's verse 7, right here. Behold, I am coming quickly. Verse 12. Behold, I am coming quickly. Verse 20. Surely I am coming quickly. And it's very interesting here because in verse 12, I'm coming quickly. And let's look at this. My reward is with me to give everyone according to his work. Does that sound a little bit like Matthew 16, 27 and 28, where Jesus says, and I'm going to come in the glory of the Father with his angels and reward people. Sounds kind of like the same thing, doesn't it? And so it really is so clear, friends, when we look at these things. I just watched a debate earlier tonight. Maybe some of you watched it. Hey, I've got some people on here. So again, I'm just doing this for the very first time, but I think if I exit the screen, I can maybe see, I think I can see who's there. I just don't know how. So let me see here. This is going to be lots of fun over time as we do this. Yeah, so I have no idea to know who's there, but I think there is a way. Once there was a way to get back home. Anyway, so for those of you who tuned in, thank you. Oh, one person left already. Thanks a lot. I'm crushed. My inner child is really hurting. At any rate, we're going to have a lot of fun with this over time. But I was just watching a debate earlier tonight between Don Preston and Chris Date, which I had looked forward to for quite a while. Maybe some of you saw it. But another issue it's so important that we'll get to in other videos is timing and nature. When it comes to any type of prophecy, those are the two main elements. So the timing being when was this prophecy to happen, the nature being what was going to happen. And one of the things that I noticed, and this wasn't a surprise, I guess, but Don Preston, who comes from the fulfilled perspective, he usually refers to it as covenant eschatology. And then Chris Date, who considers himself a partial preterist. Again, the difference there being that the partial preterist sees a lot of fulfillment around the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple and so forth in AD 70. But the partial preterist sees the four main events of the end times, which would be the second appearing of Jesus, the judgment, the cosmic disturbances, earth being destroyed, restored, and so on, and the resurrection. The partial preterist still sees those as yet future, where somebody who holds to the fulfilled view, or what's sometimes called full preterism, believes that all of that culminated at that point, and that's where I am. But at any rate, it was interesting that Preston was focusing more on the timing, but Chris Date was focusing more on the nature. Well, Greg Laurie here is he's completely ignoring the timing, and that's what I did for years. But it's so important to know that paradigm of timing and nature. And here's what I think is I'll probably begin to wrap this up, unless there are some comments and things we might engage a little bit. Again, I didn't tell anybody I was doing this because it's the very first time, and I wanted to give it a shot. But and I will get some. My hope is to get some regular times that I'm doing these live streams so people can tune in. But what's interesting is, I had done this for a long time, and I think this is sort of the death knell of a futurist way of looking at these scriptures. At least one of them is that in futurism, the timing, which is not apocalyptic and which is crystal clear, it's always soon, quickly, near, at hand, at the door, etc. It's always that way. If you go through the entire New Testament and you see any texts having to do with the end times events, not all of them have time statements, but every single time, without exception, as far as I know, that a time statement is given, it only and always boundaries those events to the first century. And so what futurism does is ignores the timing, which is not apocalyptic, which is not symbolic, and instead makes the apocalyptic language that is symbolic and makes that literal. So it makes the things that are supposed to be symbolic literal, and it takes the timing that's supposed to be literal and makes it symbolic. And in so doing, it completely upends and turns upside down the end times paradigm. And that's a really important thing to see, because when you look at the timing of these things, even as we're all, and I am too, as we're all continuing to study and learning, if the timing is clear, which it is, whatever was meant by Christ's second appearing, whatever was meant by the resurrection, whatever was meant by, the earth either blowing up or being restored, and whatever was meant by the judgment, all those things, according to Scripture, according to Jesus, according to the apostles, according to the Old Testament prophets, all those things, whatever they were, however they worked out, are already done in the past. And that's, the burden of proof then is on the futurist to say, how can you explain away these timing, explain away quickly, soon, shortly. Again, Greg Laurie in the video, if you were with me at that point, said that John basically had this problem of having to use first century language to describe 21st century events. No, he didn't. Greg Laurie had the problem. I had the problem. If you're a futurist watching, hello, you have the problem. John had no problems at all. He knew what he was saying, and his audience understood what he was saying. Now, I'm going to try one more time to figure out. I know there's a way to know who you are. Oh, here we go. We got some comments here. Cool. Lives are awesome. Hope you continue to do them. From Candy. Candy's been a full predator since 2012. You got me beat for a few years. David, hi Joel. Good to see you trying out live stream. David has just become a really good friend from Canada. And so again, what I will do is I'll come up with some live stream times. Again, this is brand new for me. And there's got to be a way that I can probably still show you my full screen too, and where I can just look at those. But at any rate, I'm not sure how to do so much on here, but I'm glad to have gotten it going. And this is a pretty cool platform. And again, I'll be able to do critique videos. I will be able to screen share different scriptures and things I'm doing. Another thing I want to do is start doing some interviews. I've been privileged to be a part of lots of other people's interviews, but I want to start doing that. One cool thing with StreamYard is you can have up to, I think up to like 4 or 5 other people. So, I mean, who knows? I might even host some kind of a debate or interview people on different things, but I'm super excited. And I finally got my little studio kind of set up. And so we might have some fun with the backgrounds and stuff. But at any rate, man, I'm trying to figure out how to, maybe there isn't a way, because I want to see comments and see who people are too. But there might be a way to do this so you can still see the whole screen, but I really don't know. Does anybody else have any comments? I wanted to keep this a little bit of a short here. Okay. Candy says the most is 10 people. Yeah. Right now I just have the free version, but even with the free version, I think you can do up to 6 people. I want to mention just a couple other things before I go for tonight, which is, I'll go back here. I have a good friend, Darren Gregg, and some of you will know Darren if he's been, has participated over the years in lots of the different Facebook groups and things. He's actually one of the first people that I met on this journey and has been super helpful, and we've become good friends. He lives in Indiana, and I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple times in person, which is great. But Darren and I had a podcast called The Flaming Sword, under the name Flaming Sword Apologetics. If you go on YouTube, you can find Flaming Sword Apologetics. Sorry, my phone is dinging, and I'm not going to grab it right now. It's if you could see where I'm so cramped where I am here. It's not even funny. And so, if I just try to get up to stop my phone from ringing, horrible things could happen. And so anyway, I'm going to leave that. But anyway, Darren and I did a season of, again, it's called the Flaming Sword Podcast. He does the production and stuff. He does a great job. And we did it on apologetics, basically defending the faith from different perspectives. At that time, I was learning, and I was definitely leaning towards the fulfilled view, aka preterism. But because of the job I had, and because of some personal relationships and people that were very, very uncomfortable with what I was coming to understand, we chose to not talk about anything to do with eschatology, but no more. And so we are just starting to shoot episodes for season 2. We're going to shoot a few first and then put them out there. But I think it's really good. Darren and I take the scriptures really seriously. We take Jesus really seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. We have a little fun on that too. And I just want to, you might want to go just to get familiar with kind of how we've done that. Go to the Flaming Sword or Flaming Sword Apologetics, and you can see the podcast from season 1. They're on, all the major, Spotify, and stuff like that. And nothing else is coming to mind right now, but you can, and I think you can listen to them right on YouTube, but it'll give you a flavor for the podcast to see if you like it. And then again, the episodes we're shooting now, at least the first several episodes of season 2 are really about eschatology. And we're trying to present it in a way, that can be a good on-ramp for people who are just learning. And so we're covering some of the main texts and talking about that, but I think that might be exciting for you to check out. There's got to be a way to, well, I don't know. I'm going to go back here and sorry, I'll get better at this, but just to see if there's any more notification button on. Look forward to your next live. Awesome. So, hey, if you haven't already, turn your notification button to on. Thank you, Candy. So you can get the next live stream. And again, I'll probably have maybe come up with a weekly time that kind of works in my schedule that, and if you have suggestions, let me know too. I know that sometimes people are more available on an evening or on a weekend. I'm actually part of a local church here where I live. And it's a lot better situations than some people that believe what I believe might find themselves in. But I might even do a Sunday morning. I know there's some guys that do that, and I might even do a Sunday morning thing, and like earlier in the morning, and then I could still go be part of that service. But that might be helpful for some of you too. But anyway, really appreciate the comments and you guys tuning in. Let people know that I'm doing this. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do that. By the way, I never expected this. I've shared this before, but just quickly before we close this up, I started my channel for one reason. That's because I was told shortly after I was no longer a pastor that my sermons were all disappearing from the website. And some of that would happen, when there's a pastor transition, but it wasn't that. It was these particular sermons that I had been preaching that were getting a little bit closer to, to what probably most of you watching and myself believes about the last days. And so I had a friend, I had a YouTube account, but I had never done anything with the channel. And I had friends say, hey, you should archive those because a lot of people had found them really helpful. And that's the only reason I started the channel. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll put out some content. I've got and I don't even follow my analytics that much, but I've got 486 subscribers or so now compared to, Greg Laurie's 515,000. It's not quite a dent, but I've been really thankful because I haven't even been putting out very regular content lately, and still just every day it's like it just creeps along and I get a few more subscribers. And now that I can do things a little nicer technologically that might help too. And again, over time, I want to get more regular with content. I mean, let's see, because we need to get this message out there. And I know some other guys that are doing this, and we're not in competition. The more people we can get on the same page with getting this message of fulfillment out there and really seeing the glories of Christ, the better. And so, if you haven't shared, liked, subscribed yet, if you haven't talked to other people about my channel, and those of you that that have watched me kind of know my approach, it's a little bit more relational. Maybe I do have a little fun. I try to really just stick to one thing and make it easy to understand. And some of you have said that that's been helpful. And so let's get this channel moving. I do plan on getting a Patreon account because I'm hoping over time to use this ministry for some of my income, as well as I'm kind of praying and thinking through things and what it is that the good Lord wants to do with me. So appreciate all of you tuning in. Again, we'll get a regular time set up of some sort. Tell your friends I'm doing this. I hope the sound is okay, and feel free to let me know that. If you want to message me or make a comment on the video or whatever. But I'm going to go ahead and say good night on this one. And I hope you all have a super swell rest of your week. Pastor Joel saying bye for now.